The jungle was alive with 1,000 voices, but one sound did not belong. It was thin, high, and cutting, carrying through the underbrush with desperate urgency. It was the sound of a human cub crying. For a predator like Karuel, it should have been a beacon. The cry of prey was a call older than stars, etched into bone and blood: hunt, seize, feast. Yet Karuel's ears flattened against his skull as the sound rolled through the mossy canyon, and instead of hunger he felt something stranger. He felt curiosity. The jungle of Vaith had been Karuel's domain for 5 hunting cycles. His sleek scales blended into the obsidian rocks, his triple-clawed feet left no trail across loam, and his golden eyes could pierce through shadow and mist. The smaller creatures of the canopy had learned to scatter at his scent. Even the towering thunder lizards who shook trees when they walked gave way when he passed. He was predator prime, unchallenged, eternal. Until the sound of the cub. He crouched low, nostrils flaring. Humans were not meant to be here. Their colony outpost lay at the edge of the great basalt cliffs, far from the wild jungle interior. Karuel had stalked the cliffs from afar before, watching the strange bipeds build their strange square dens from metal and light. He had heard the hum of their fire spears, had seen them move in packs, always loud, never cautious, never silent like hunters should be. They were not his concern. And yet, one of their young was in his jungle. The cry came again, breaking on a whimper. Karuel rose, muscles rippling under his black scales, and slithered forward, careful not to disturb the mossy ground with more sound than necessary. His long tail swayed behind him, balancing his weight as he climbed a ridge and looked down. There it was. A human cub, small even for its kind, sat tangled in vines near the roots of a fallen tree. Its pale skin was streaked with mud, its tiny hands clawing at the green bonds that held it. Tear tracks shone on its round face, and its throat trembled as it wailed again. The sound echoed, bouncing against stone walls and carrying far, far beyond. Karuel's jaws parted. That sound was a death sentence. He could already smell the change in the air. Carcass birds shifted in the canopy, drawn closer. The ground shadows stirred as smaller predators slunk nearer, waiting for weakness. Even the trees themselves seemed to lean in, vines twitching as parasitic feeders reached. The cub had no chance. Karuel should have walked away. The jungle was law. The weak were consumed, the careless devoured. His ancestors had survived because they obeyed this law without hesitation. To interfere was madness. But instead of turning, he stepped down the ridge. The cub noticed him at once. Its wide, wet eyes froze, its cry caught in its throat, and it went still. Karuel paused a few feet away, tilting his head. Even so small, even helpless, the human looked at him not with the blank panic of prey but with something different. Something calculating. The cub's gaze held not only fear but also expectation. It expected him to do something other than kill. A sharp hiss echoed through the brush, breaking the moment. Another predator had arrived. Karuel's eyes narrowed as he turned his head. A 6-legged stalker beast, mottled green and silver, slunk into view. Its jaws dripped, rows of needle teeth bared, and its red eyes locked onto the cub. It gave no acknowledgement to Karuel, as if assuming the great hunter would not contest such easy prey. The insult pricked him deeper than claws. The stalker crept forward, muscles tensing for a pounce. The cub whimpered again, clutching at the vines as if they might shield it. And Karuel moved. He was faster. One heartbeat the stalker lunged, the next Karuel's tail cracked like a whip, smashing into its side with the force of stone fall. The beast screeched, tumbling across the moss, bones snapping under impact. Before it could recover, Karuel leapt and landed upon it, his claws raking deep. A single bite to the neck silenced it forever. The jungle went quiet again, except for the cub's trembling breath. Karuel lifted his blood-slick head, staring at the small human. What had he done? He had killed to protect something that was not his kin, not his pack, not even his species. He had broken the law. The cub blinked at him, then did something that froze him utterly. It reached out a tiny hand. Toward him. Karuel took a slow step back, but the cub's hand remained outstretched. There was no fierce scream, no attempt to flee. Instead, the little creature whispered something in its own tongue. He did not know the words, but the tone was soft, grateful. The jungle whispered too. More predators would come. The smell of blood was thick, and though the stalker's corpse was fresh, hungrier things would arrive soon. The cub could not survive alone. Karuel's instincts battled inside him. Leave it, the law snarled. Take it, another voice whispered. Protect it. See what happens. In the end, he bent his neck and cut the vines with a single slice of his claw. The cub gasped, tumbling free, then clung to his scaled leg. Karuel froze, every muscle locked. Its small warmth pressed against him, sticky with mud and fear. He could shake it off. He could fling it away. But instead, slowly, he shifted to let it cling without slipping. The cub rested its head against his hide, still sniffling but quieter now. Karuel stared into the shadowed jungle. The law of prey and predator had guided him since hatching. But now, carrying this fragile human against his side, he felt the law shift. Something larger than instinct stirred. Something that did not make sense yet felt undeniable. The jungle was coming alive again. He could hear wings beating, claws scrabbling, and distant howls rising. The cub had brought trouble into his domain, more danger than he had ever tolerated. Every creature within 100 spans would smell weakness and converge. And yet he did not leave it. He adjusted his stance, curled his tail protectively around, and began to move toward the cliffs where the humans lived. The cub's kind would know what to do. Behind him, the vines of the fallen tree twitched unnaturally, as if reaching. He hissed low. The jungle itself was restless tonight, as if testing him. The cub shifted, tightening its grip, and Karuel's resolve hardened. For the first time in his life, the predator was not only hunter. He was guardian. He would discover soon enough why humans guarded their own so fiercely. The jungle did not forgive mercy. Karuel knew this truth better than any scar on his hide, yet here he was, a human cub clinging to his leg as though the great predator were some towering parent. Every step he took pressed deeper into unfamiliar territory. Not the soil of his hunting grounds, but the ground of consequence. The cub made noise with every movement. Its small chest hiccuped with the aftershocks of crying, its throat issued soft mews whenever a shadow shifted, and once in a while, it spoke little human sounds. Karuel could not understand the words, but the cadence carried strange trust, as if the creature believed he was listening. Trust was dangerous. Trust drew weakness. Weakness drew death. And yet, Karuel's stride did not falter. The cliffs lay days away. Even at his fastest pace, carrying the cub meant he would need to stop, to hunt, to rest. The jungle would know. The jungle would converge. Already the carcass birds circled overhead, long wings cutting lazy spirals in the humid sky. Their patience was endless. By dusk, Karuel scented the first test. It slithered from the trees ahead, a coil beast, thick as a human transport, its scaled body glistening with swamp water. Its jaws gaped wide enough to snap Karuel in half, fangs dripping venom that hissed against the leaves. The cub whimpered, burying its face against his leg. Karuel lowered himself, teeth baring. He could avoid the beast if he abandoned the cub, but with the weight of the small one against him, stealth and speed were lost. He would have to fight. The coil struck like lightning. Karuel dodged aside, dragging the cub with him, but the beast's body lashed, slamming against his ribs. Pain flared. The cub cried out. Snarling, Karuel struck back. His claws raked across its body, scales tearing, blood spraying. The coil hissed, lashing again, winding around him in loops that constricted like stone bands. His breath caught as his ribs cracked. The cub's tiny wails were muffled against his side. Predator instinct surged. Kill or be killed. He snapped his head forward, jaws clamping onto the coil's neck. He bit down, harder, harder, until the crunch of vertebrae broke through the coil's screech. The massive body convulsed once, then fell limp. Karuel staggered free, sides heaving. The cub clung tighter, sticky with sweat and mud. The jungle was silent for 3 heartbeats. Then it erupted. Shadows detached from the branches above, carrion gliders, shark-beaked and shrieking, drawn by the smell of blood. Smaller lizard packs crept from undergrowth, eyes glittering with hunger. Even the ground twitched as burrowworms stirred, tasting violence. Too many. He could not fight them all. Not alone. Caruel grabbed the cub in one clawed hand, lifting it against his chest. It squirmed, frightened, but did not struggle. He leapt over the dead coil and dashed into the trees, moving fast despite pain. Branches whipped, thorns tore at his hide, but he ran with predator grace, vaulting over roots, ducking beneath strangling vines. Behind him, the horde followed. The cub's small hands clutched his scales, its face pressed tight against him. It was not silent, but its cries were soft now, muffled. Not the noise of prey, but of trust again. Trust that he would keep it safe. His breath grew ragged as the chase lengthened. His wounds burned, venom seeping into his blood. Still, he ran until the air thinned and stone walls rose before him. A canyon, narrow and high. A trap for most creatures. For Caruel, perhaps a chance. He darted inside. The gliders swooped but could not follow deep. The lizard pack snarled but balked at the tight stone. Even the burrowworms would not cross the rocky bed. For the moment, he was safe. He collapsed against the wall, lowering the cub onto a mossy stone. His chest rose and fell like a forged bellows. He licked blood from his claws, eyes half shut. The cub stared up at him, face pale but calm now. It toddled closer on uncertain legs, pressing its small hand against his muzzle. Caruel froze. Its touch was feather-light, trusting, absurd. No prey touched predator willingly. Yet the cub's gaze held no fear. Only gratitude. He growled low, a rumble that should have shaken it. But instead, the cub smiled. Caruel's chest tightened in a way battle never had. Night fell. The canyon grew black as ink, broken only by the glow of insects drifting like sparks. Caruel did not sleep. He crouched, tail curled protectively, eyes scanning. The cub huddled against his flank, breathing slow. Once, it whimpered in its sleep, and without thought he curled his tail tighter, shielding it. The jungle whispered around them. Predators shifted, but none dared yet. They were waiting. Watching. Testing his resolve. At dawn, the cub stirred, blinking up at him. It spoke again, words he did not know. Then it made a gesture, fingers together, moving to its mouth. Caruel realized with a jolt, it was hungry. He rose, leading the cub perched safely in the canyon nook. He stalked into the trees beyond, hunting swift and silent despite his wounds. When he returned, he carried a long-limbed crawler, still twitching. He tore it open, offering a piece. The cub wrinkled its nose, shaking its head. It would not eat raw flesh. Caruel frowned, puzzled. What kind of creature refused food? Yet the cub pushed a stick toward the carcass, repeating the gesture toward the glowing insects. Fire. It wanted fire. Impossible. Fire was alien to the jungle. Fire was death. But humans wielded it as though it were kin. Caruel hesitated. Then, curious, he tried. He struck his claws against stone, sparks leaping. He growled with satisfaction. Again and again until dried moss caught, flickering. The cub clapped its tiny hands, eyes bright. It crouched close, showing him how to place the meat near the flame. The smell that rose was unlike any Caruel had known. Not raw blood, not rot, not fresh kill. It was warm, rich, enticing. The cub ate eagerly. And to his surprise, when he tasted the fire meat, so did he. The jungle was changing around him, and he was changing with it. But change drew eyes. As the sun rose high, a shadow swept across the canyon mouth. Caruel stiffened. It was no beast. It was a craft, metal wings slicing air, engines whining. Human. Searching. The cub leapt to its feet, shrieking with joy, waving its arms. The sound echoed. And Caruel's heart froze. The craft landed at the canyon edge. Figures poured out, armed with fire spears. Their visors glinted as they scanned the shadows. Their weapons locked onto him. He bared his teeth, tail lashing. They saw only predator. Enemy. Threat. The cub ran forward, stumbling, arms outstretched. It cried in human tongue, pointing back at him. The soldiers paused, confused. Their weapons did not lower. Consequence. Caruel crouched, every muscle trembling. If they fired, he would strike, though it meant death. The cub planted itself between him and the soldiers, arms spread. Its tiny body trembled, but its voice rose, shrill and fierce, as though scolding them. The soldiers hesitated. One step forward, visor tilting. Then, slowly, their weapons lowered. Caruel exhaled a breath he had not realized he held. But even as the humans reached for the cub, even as relief flickered across their faces, the jungle struck back. A roar split the air, deeper than thunder, shaking the stone walls. From the trees beyond the canyon mouth, something vast approached. The ground trembled beneath its steps. Leaves burst upward as a titan shape forced its way through. The cub screamed. The soldiers turned, weapons snapping up. Caruel's eyes narrowed. He knew that sound. He knew that shape. The jungle was sending its king. And the law was clear: no predator guarded prey without consequence. This was the jungle had always been alive with sound, but this roar silenced everything. Birds scattered from the canopy in panicked flocks, gliders vanished into cracks, and even the endless insects ceased their buzzing. The jungle itself held its breath. Something older, stronger, and far more dangerous than anything Caruel had fought was stepping into the canyon. The humans raised their fire spears, spreading into formation. Their voices crackled through the air in clipped, urgent tones. The cub clung to the nearest soldier's leg, but its eyes kept darting back to Caruel. Trust still burned in that gaze, as if it expected him to stand beside them. Caruel's tail lashed against the stone. He had no reason to fight for them. The law said predator rose above prey, not alongside it. But the law had already bent when he had cut the vines. It had bent when he had killed to protect the cub. Now, as the king approached, Caruel knew the law would break. The ground shook. The creature emerged from the tree-line like a living mountain. Its hide was a mass of scarred plates, green stone fused with bone. Its jaws were wider than the canyon mouth itself, lined with tusks long as spears. Eyes glowed like molten amber, and each step sent cracks racing through the earth. This was the jungle's true sovereign, the devourer, known only in predator tales whispered to younglings. Few believed it real. Fewer still had lived after seeing it. The soldiers cursed in human tongue, aiming their weapons. The cub whimpered. The devourer roared again, a sound that turned marrow to water, and charged. Caruel moved before thought could catch him. He sprang forward, claws scraping stone, intercepting the beast's path. His roar answered its own, smaller but no less defiant. The soldiers opened fire. Bright lances of burning light stabbed into the devourer's hide, searing flesh, but barely slowing it. The monster plowed through, tusks smashing stone walls into rubble. Caruel leapt high, claws tearing across its face. Scales split, blood spurted. The devourer bellowed, shaking its head, nearly flinging him free. He clung on, ripping again and again, gouging deep lines into its eye ridge. The beast slammed itself into the canyon wall. Pain exploded across Caruel's ribs. He fell, landing hard, ere leaving his chest in a hiss. The cub cried out, the sound cutting through the chaos like a blade. Caruel's vision blurred, but the sound anchored him. He staggered back to his feet. The humans advanced, firing with renewed fury. Their leader barked commands, gesturing for explosives. A pair of soldiers planted charges at the canyon base. But the devourer was too fast for its size. It lunged forward, tusks sweeping. One soldier vanished in a spray of red. Another was crushed against the stone, weapon falling silent. Caruel roared again, throwing himself at the devourer's flank. He tore into softer scales near the joints, ripping muscle. The beast bellowed and twisted, trying to snap him in half, but Caruel danced back, tail striking its snout like a whip. The cub screamed something in human tongue, pointing at Caruel, then at the monster. Its small voice carried an order the humans seemed to understand. They shifted fire, focusing on the wounds Caruel had opened. Light burned into the torn flesh, widening gashes. The devourer howled, thrashing wildly. Its tail smashed the canyon floor, sending shockwaves through stone. Cracks raced beneath the human's feet, one soldier tumbling into darkness with a strangled cry. Caruel leapt again, clambering up the beast's back, claws anchoring him to ridges of armor. His jaws closed on the exposed wound at its neck. He bit deep, tearing, shaking with all his might. Hot blood gushed, coating him. The devourer slammed itself sideways, smashing him against stone again and again. Bones cracked, vision dimmed. But Caruel held, refusing to release. The human's charges exploded. Fire ripped through the canyon, blasting shards of rock into the devourer's belly. Its roar broke into a guttural scream of pain. It staggered, legs buckling. Caruel tore free from its neck just as it collapsed, the ground shuddering with its fall. The canyon filled with dust and blood. For a heartbeat, silence. Then movement. The devourer, impossibly, was still alive. One ember eye blazed, filled with primal rage. Its massive head swung toward the cub. The humans were scattered, weapons drained, too far to reach in time. The cub stood frozen, tiny body trembling, eyes wide. Caruel did not think. He ran. Every bone screamed, every wound burned, but he sprinted, tail whipping for balance. He leapt just as the devourer's jaws opened, tusks descending toward the cub. He crashed into the beast's mouth, claws driving deep into the soft flesh within. He ripped, shredded, bit, a frenzy of teeth and talons. The devourer tried to close its jaws, but Caruel wedged his body inside, fighting upward, tearing at its throat from within. Light blazed around him. The humans had fired again, straight into the wounds he carved. The energy beams punched through, searing holes into the devourer's skull. Its final roar shook the world. Then it collapsed for good, crashing into the canyon floor with a sound like a mountain breaking. The dust cleared. Caruel staggered from the monster's mouth, drenched in blood, barely standing. His limbs trembled. His vision narrowed. The law was broken beyond repair. No predator fought like this for prey. No predator risked everything for something not its own. The cub broke free from the soldier's grasp and ran to him, arms flinging around his leg. Its tiny body pressed against his blood-soaked scales, heedless of danger. It spoke again, voice breaking, but the meaning clear. Gratitude. Relief. Trust. The humans lowered their weapons, staring. One removed its helmet, a female with lines of command etched on her face. She stepped closer, cautious but respectful. She spoke slowly, carefully, as though addressing another hunter rather than a beast. Caruel did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. They had seen what he had done. They knew he had saved not only the cub, but all of them. He growled low, exhaustion threatening to drag him under. His eyes met the woman's. Predator to predator. She gave a single nod. The cub tugged on his scales, chattering urgently, gesturing toward the humans, then back at him. It wanted him to come. To leave the jungle. To walk with them. Caruel turned his head toward the canyon. The jungle whispered still, restless, furious. The law of prey and predator was gone for him now. He had chosen a new path, one that did not make sense to instinct but made sense to something deeper. He looked down at the cub. Its small hands clung tighter, refusing to let go. Caruel exhaled, a deep rumble that shook dust from his chest. Slowly, painfully, he bent and lifted the cub into his arms. Its tiny face lit with a smile, tears still streaking but joy undeniable. The humans murmured, lowering their weapons completely. The woman gave another nod, softer this time, as if in thanks. Behind them, the Jungle King lay silent at last. The canyon smelled of blood and fire. The law was broken. But in its place, something new had been born. Something the jungle could never understand. The predator had become guardian. And the war between law and choice was only beginning. The canyon still smelled of blood and fire long after the devourer's fall. The jungle's silence was not peace, but awe. The smaller predators that had once stalked the cub lingered at the edges, their eyes glowing in the dark, watching. They did not attack. They did not even move. Something had changed. Caruel stood at the center of it, battered and bleeding, the cub pressed close to his chest. His body screamed for rest, for surrender, but instinct held him upright. The jungle could smell weakness, and though the law he had once obeyed was broken, he would not let it claim him now. The humans gathered around, weapons lowered, their voices soft and cautious. They moved not like hunters but like creatures faced with something sacred. They did not rush forward to seize the cub. Instead, they formed a circle, leaving space between themselves and Caruel, as though acknowledging the bond that had been forged in blood. The cub wriggled in his arms, reaching toward them. Its voice called out names, mother, father, perhaps, tones heavy with longing. A pair of soldiers stepped forward, one male, one female, their visors lifted, their faces pale with worry and joy. The cub reached again, but it did not struggle to leave Caruel's grasp. It looked between its kin and the predator who held it, torn in ways only the young could be. Caruel lowered his head, claws twitching. He knew the cub belonged with them. That was the truth of its kind. Yet a strange tightness gripped his chest at the thought of letting it go. He, who had never cared for pack or kin, who had lived only by tooth and claw, now hesitated at surrendering one small life. The female soldier stepped closer. She knelt, her eyes never leaving his. Her hands rose, empty, open. She spoke in a soft tone, a rhythm meant not for him but for the cub. The little one stirred, listening, then looked up at him. Its small hand touched his muzzle again, gently. He understood. It was time. Slowly, Caruel lowered the cub into her arms. The human woman held it tightly, tears streaking her cheeks as she whispered to it. The cub buried its face against her, but even then, it reached one hand back, fingers outstretched toward him. Caruel rumbled low, a sound between growl and farewell. The circle of humans tightened, relief flooding their faces. The male soldier clapped the female's shoulder, their voices carrying gratitude. Yet still, none raised weapons. They knew what had happened. They had seen the predator save what should never have been his concern. The jungle whispered around them, the rustle of leaves and hiss of distant creatures. But it no longer sounded like law. It sounded like change. Caruel staggered, his strength failing at last. Wounds burned, blood dripped from his scales, vision swam. He collapsed to one knee, his tail dragging across stone. The humans tensed, unsure whether to approach. The cub cried out sharply, reaching again. Its little voice cracked with urgency. The female holding it hesitated, then stepped closer, the others following. They moved carefully, like approaching another soldier wounded in battle. One of them knelt, pulling a small case from their pack. Strange tools glinted. They spoke rapidly to the others, who nodded. Then, with a glance at him, they reached forward. Caruel growled low, but did not strike. The cub's gaze anchored him again. He allowed the human to press strange patches against his wounds, to inject cool liquid into his veins. Pain dulled. Breath steadied. For the first time, he realized they were not trying to kill him. They were trying to heal. Hours passed as the humans worked. The canyon slowly filled with morning light, the shadows retreating. When the sun rose high, Caruel stood again, steadier than before. His wounds were not gone, but the sharp edge of death had passed. The cub slept in its mother's arms, tiny chest rising and falling. Yet even in dreams, it clutched a scale he had shed during battle, holding it like a talisman. Caruel watched, silent. The humans began to speak among themselves, voices heated but restrained. Some gestured toward him with unease, others with respect. He could not understand the words, but he understood their conflict. Predator or ally? Monster or guardian? In the end, it was the cub who decided. When it awoke, it squirmed from its mother's grip and toddled straight to him, still clutching the scale. Its small arms wrapped around his leg once more, the same way it had in the beginning. The humans stared. One by one, their weapons lowered completely. The leader, the female with the command lines, stepped forward and gave him a slow nod. Respect, recognition? An unspoken pact. Caruel inclined his head in return. The humans prepared to leave, gathering their dead and their gear. They loaded into their craft, the hum of engines filling the canyon. The cub was carried aboard, but it pressed its face against the window, eyes never leaving him until the craft lifted into the sky. Caruel stood alone once more, the jungle whispering at his back. But he was no longer the same predator who had ruled these shadows without challenge. The law he had once obeyed had been shattered. The jungle had tested him, and instead of killing, he had chosen to protect. Instead of obeying, he had defied. And in that defiance, he had discovered something new. Days passed. The jungle watched him with wary eyes. Predators no longer challenged him as they once had. The memory of the devourer's fall lingered, and with it, the scent of something greater than instinct. He hunted still, but not for hunger alone. He hunted to guard, to test, to protect. Sometimes, at the edge of the cliffs, he saw the humans again. Their strange square dens gleamed in the sun, their fire spears glimmering. They did not fire at him. Instead, they watched, as he watched them. Between them lay an unspoken truce, bound not by law but by the bond of one cub's trust. And sometimes, at the boundary, the cub appeared. It would wave its small arms, calling in its strange tongue, always holding the scale like a charm. And Caruel, though he never drew closer, would lower his head in acknowledgement. The jungle whispered still, angry that its law had been broken. But Caruel no longer cared. He had learned why humans guarded their own so fiercely. Because to guard was more than instinct. To guard was choice. To guard was strength. And now, the predator guarded too. He turned back into the depths of the jungle, claws leaving deep marks in the soil. His golden eyes gleamed in the shadows, not as hunter alone, but as something more. Something new. The law of the jungle had ended with him. A new law had begun. And somewhere beyond the cliffs, a cub slept soundly at night, clutching a predator's scale, dreaming not of fear, but of guardianship.